Hello. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk about my work on primordial black holes and secondary gravitational waves from warm inflation. So this talk is based on these works, which are done in collaboration with Professor Rajiv Jain at ISC and Arvind Mishra from IISER Pune. Uh, so we know this cosmic inflation is a phase of rapid accelerated expansion in the early universe, which was introduced to resolve some shortcomings in the standard Big Bang cosmology. And this phase not only solves those problems, but also provides the seeds of density perturbations for all the structures at the late time. To describe this phase, there are two descriptions. One is the cold description or the standard description, in which there is this inflaton field, which drives this inflationary phase, and it rolls down this potential. And during this slow roll phase, the universe inflates and it attains a supercooled state. Then to bring back temperature and particles in the universe, there is a separate reheating phase after the end of inflation, where this inflaton field oscillates and decays into the fundamental and all the beyond standard model particles. So this is the standard description. And this is the evolution equation of this inflaton field. In contrast to this description, there is another description which is called the warm inflation, in which this inflaton, as it inflates, it also dissipates into the radiation fields. So there is a coupling in the inflaton and radiation fields throughout this inflationary phase. So it's a more general and more natural description. And this dissipative effects arise from all these fundamental principles of a coupled inflaton radiation system. And there is, because of this dissipation, there is a radiation production and there is a finite temperature in the universe throughout the inflationary phase. Therefore, a separate reheating phase at the end of inflation is not necessarily required in this kind of a description. And the evolution of this inflaton field is modified with this additional friction term, which is becoming because of this inflaton couplings with the other fields. And depending on the microphysics of that coupling, this dissipation coefficient is obtained. So in this talk, we'll be discussing about this description of inflation, which is well motivated, natural, and general. And in the limiting case, it goes to this cold inflation when this coefficient goes to 0. So this is a schematic of how the fluctuations generated in inflation evolve. So in the standard inflation, we have just the quantum fluctuations, but in the warm inflation description, we have both quantum as well as thermal fluctuations. And as the universe inflates and the co-moving horizon shrinks during this inflation era, these wavelengths of these fluctuation modes stretch and at some point cross the horizon, and they become super horizon, and then they re-enter at some later epochs in the universe, like in the radiation era or in the matter era. So from the observations of cosmic microwave background, we have stringent bounds on the amplitude of these fluctuations, these large scale fluctuations at the CMB scales, which is constrained to be 10 to power minus 9. However, the small scales of the fluctuations are not well constrained. And it is possible that these small scale fluctuations are quite large. So it can happen that these large fluctuations, when these re-enter in the horizon at later epoch, if they have sufficient amplitude, they can just collapse into structures, some compact objects such as primordial black holes. So what are primordial black holes? These are the black holes with a primordial origin. And because they are formed from the physics of inflation, and so therefore they are a unique and unique probe to the inflationary physics. And unlike these astrophysical black holes, which are the stellar end products, these are formed directly by the collapse of the inflationary perturbations. Therefore, they span over a wide range of mass. Given in this plot are the fraction of the density in the form of primordial black holes at the time of formation, which is called the initial mass fraction. So all these are the constraints. So the regions above this line or color line are excluded. and the regions below are allowed from various observations. This dashed line shows a mass of 10 to power 15 grams, which is the mass of black holes which have, so the black holes which have mass less than 10 to power 15 grams would have evaporated into Hawking radiation by now. So their constraints are from their evaporation. But the black holes which are more massive than 10 to power 15 grams, they could be stable and they could contribute as the dark matter. So in this plot is the contribution of these black holes in the form of dark matter, which is denoted by this fraction FPBH. So these colored shaded regions are excluded, and you can see that in this range of mass of 10 to power 17 to 10 to power 23 gram, there is a window in which the primordial black hole can constitute the full dark matter abundance. So that's why they are very interesting to study. So in our study in this paper, we studied this black hole formation from the warm inflationary models. So we considered a canonical model of warm inflation with this kinetic minus potential and a potential of lambda phi 4. And we considered that dissipation coefficient to be proportional to T cube by phi square. So we know this lambda phi 4 in the cold inflation is ruled out in the from the CMB observations. But in the warm inflation description, we have a parameter space where we can explain these large scale CMB observations for the NSR. And also we see that the power spectrum at the very small scales is enhanced to very large values, which is required in order to generate the primordial black holes. Yeah, sure. This one is the last scale which is exiting the horizon during inflation. Oh, it's past the beginning of inflation. End of inflation. Okay. Yeah, that's the last 10 to the power 22 mega for 60 e-folds of inflation, right? Yeah, so we study that we find that in this model we get primordial black holes of just like 10 to the power 3 grams or kilogram mass range black holes. And this is the initial abundance of these black holes. So, but these tiny black holes would have just evaporated into Hawking radiation, but there are theoretical bounds on their abundance from various from their evaporation leading to some LSPs or dark matter kind of particles. So we find that our model agrees with those bounds. Then there is another proposal that if these black holes evaporate and this evaporation stops at some Planck scale, that means this 10 to the power 3 gram evaporates and then leaves 10 to the power minus 5 gram relics. So those relics can constitute the full dark matter. So that proposal was proposed in this Nature paper, and we find that our this model can produce can satisfy this proposal. Next, we study these scalar-induced gravitational waves from this model of warm inflation. So, because there are large scalar perturbations required for the period generation, so these scalar perturbations can source the second-order tensor perturbations, and that can lead to a spectrum of secondary gravitational waves. And we find that in this model of this 10 to the power 3 grams PBH, we generate a secondary gravitational wave spectrum of this frequency range of 1 to 10 to the power 6 hertz, which is very high frequency range for the ongoing or the future detectors. But there are some proposals, very futuristic proposals, in which one can probe these regimes. We next study the non-canonical models of warm inflation. So till now, we had just this kinetic minus potential in the Lagrangian, but now we add another term, which is a non-linear kinetic term, a Galilean-like non-linear term of this form. And we consider lambda phi 4 and a dissipation proportional to T. So we find that the power spectrum is red tilted, and the NSR are in agreement with the CMB for this model. And also at the intermediate scales, the power spectrum is enhanced hugely. And this can lead to PBH production. We also, I'll just mention that this model is also in agreement with the Swampland conjectures which are some string theory conjectures to embed such models in high energy theory. Okay, so we find that we can generate this window of open window mass range of black holes, which can constitute the full dark matter abundance. So we see that in this range of mass 10 to the power 15 to 10 to the power 20 grams, black holes are generated, and which includes this open window for dark matter. Then we study the secondary gravitational wave spectrum, and we find that the frequency range of 10 to the power minus 2 to 10 hertz are generated, and the spectrum lies in the sensitivity regimes of these experiments, LISA, DECIGO, BBO. So any future detection or non-detection of such GWs can be a test to these inflationary models, or basically warm inflationary models. To summarize, warm inflation is a general and a natural, well-motivated description of a coupled inflaton radiation system. And we study canonical, non-canonical models of warm inflation in the context of PBH formation. In the canonical setup, we find that kilogram mass of PBH are generated, and a GW frequency over high frequency range are generated. In the non-canonical model, we generate PBH over a wide mass range, which also includes the range which explains the full dark matter abundance. And the secondary GW spectrum for these kind of black holes lie in the sensitivity regime of future GW experiments, which can be used to test these warm inflationary models. Thank you for your attention.
Time for some short questions. Okay, Tathagata.
I have two unrelated questions. So in the warm inflation model, you showed this this friction term that is proportional to T. So that is dependent on the microscopic physics. So is there any reason you chose this proportionality, or?
Yes. So in the first work, we considered like a T cube.
Yeah.
And in the second, we considered like T. So they have a microphysical description how one obtains these T cube or T. In the canonical setup, with only just T, we could not produce PBH. So this form of
do you
silent.
have that flexibility from the microscopic physics?
Yes, obviously. Like we do the pheno after choosing a model. Till that point, if the CMB, NSR are satisfied, as long as it is satisfied, it's fine to consider any form.
Another small question for the LISA band you have shown. So how precise is the amplitude of this gravitational wave? How well it is known?
Of our model?
In general, GW coming from PBH,
right.
Is there uncertainty in the amplitude calculation of that, or?
You mean in the
amplitude? So there is an amplitude, right?
Yes, in that, yes.
So is there any uncertainty in that calculation, or is it can be calculated with some precision from the theory side, or?
So I would not comment on, because I'm not an expert on. I took this data from GW.
No, LISA part I understand.
There must
Your
be some
theoretical calculation.
In the theoretical calculation, there is no such, because it's just dependent on the power spectrum integrations, and it doesn't have uncertainties in theory.
Okay.
In the experimental side,
experimental is fine.
Okay, thank you.
One.
You mean by the cosmology? Yes. So yes, we assume that this is in the radiation era. We assume this is a monochromatic kind of lots of assumption goes in the theory. Yes.
Hi, Richa.
Hi.
Thank you for the nice talk. I was just wondering, how you have done this analysis for 5 to the power 4 potential. Right. So how sensitive it is to the choice of your potential, means if I instead consider a phi square, m square, phi square potential, right. Will I get this primordial black holes, and this same analysis will hold?
So it's very actually fine-tuned with the form of potential, with the form of epsilon, like the dissipation coefficient. Yeah, so there is no direct answer to your question, sorry, because it has to be worked down, and then only one can comment. But if one, so first step is to check whether that model is in agreement with the CMB NSR. So lambda phi 4, in our previous study, we had already seen that there is a parameter space which agrees with the CMB. So we have to make PBH, but we also have to to satisfy this part, which is very well constrained. M square phi square has an issue there itself. So that's why we didn't, or if we can add more free parameters, maybe that could also be agreeing with the observations. We didn't try that.
And just another naive question.
Sure.
Means, when you are considering this non-canonical models,
Sorry?
so in non-canonical models, usually this, I know very little about it, but this kinetic term, it actually gets either squared or is
Yes,
either we consider x squared or x to the power 4 or something like this. So what you haven't mentioned it. Okay, so it's two to the power P and Q. So do you have any specific?
Yeah, so this model we took P and Q as 0 and 1.
Okay. So it's 5x squared. You have considered x squared non-canonical model.
Yes. X1, sorry, Q1, X1.
Q1, x1.
P is 0 and Q is 1. So
Okay.
it is phi X, phi
X.
M.
Okay, one
M square.
last short question.
Yeah, hi. So when we consider non-canonical parts, so still we have gamma phi dot, that is the coupling. So that precision is all valid for the non-canonical part also. That's want to know.
So this gamma thing comes in the interaction Lagrangian. We do
Yes,
not
yes.
touch that part. It is just the inflaton Lagrangian which we are tuning.
Hmm.
So that upsilon thing, the interaction thing, is the microphysics, whichever way it is going into the radiation.
Okay.
That we are not disturbing, but the dynamics of this inflaton will be differing because of there is additional kind of a non-linear friction in this evolution.
Okay, so we still treat that gamma phi dot term, that is the same.
Yes, but the equation of motion of this will be changed. The coefficients will change because there is this non-linear thing. You
Okay.
can check in this paper or talk.
Yeah, sure. Also follow-up questions.
Maybe we can keep that for
Sure, sure.
after the talk. Thank you. So let's thank Richa again.
Thank you so much.